A lonely ranch owner's life changed when his daughters brought home a beautiful Apache woman. The sun rose every morning over the dry, golden plains, casting long shadows across the wooden fences and dusty paths. The ranch was large, stretching over acres of land where cattle roamed freely. Yet, despite the wide-open space, John's life was quiet, sometimes painfully so. His house was modest, built from weathered wood and stone, with a creaking porch that overlooked the ranch. Inside, the room smelled faintly of leather and hay. Though everything was neat and orderly, it was silent, too silent. John had not always lived alone. Many years ago, he had been married to a kind woman named Margaret. She had a gentle smile that lit up every room she entered, and a laugh that seemed to float through the house. But Margaret had passed away suddenly, leaving John and their two daughters, Emma and Leela, to manage the ranch on their own. Since then, John had tried to be strong, keeping the ranch running and caring for his daughters, but he often felt the emptiness of the house around him. Emma, the elder of the two daughters, was 17. She had her mother's soft brown eyes and a curious mind that seemed to notice everything. Leela, 15, was livelier, with a quick smile and an endless supply of energy. Both girls loved the ranch and its animals, but they also longed for adventure beyond the fences and hills. They often roamed the nearby trails, exploring the desert and the small town a few miles away, sometimes returning home with stories of the townspeople, the market, or even stray animals they tried to rescue. John spent most of his days doing the work no one else could do. He rode across the fields early in the morning, checking fences, feeding cattle, and making sure nothing was lost to the harsh desert. He mended broken tools, fixed gates, and repaired the old windmill that provided water to the ranch. The work was physically demanding but honest, and it kept his mind occupied. However, the evenings were the hardest. After dinner, the house would grow quiet. The girls would read or draw, but the silence around him felt heavy. Sometimes John would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the horizon, thinking about how lonely life had become. Despite the solitude, John was proud of his daughters. They were bright, strong, and capable, and they had learned the ways of the ranch almost as well as he had. Emma could ride horses like a seasoned cowgirl, and Leela knew how to herd the cattle without making a single one stray. The girls had also inherited Margaret's kindness and sense of curiosity, which made them warm and thoughtful. John often smiled quietly at their energy, though he sometimes worried that the world outside their ranch might be too harsh for such gentle hearts. One afternoon, John had returned from checking the cattle near the northern pasture. The sun was beginning its slow descent, turning the sky a soft pink and orange. Dust clung to his boots, and the heat of the day made him sweat through his shirt. As he approached the house, he noticed something unusual. Two figures were standing near the porch. The first sight made him squint. Emma and Leila, their faces glowing from the sun, were not alone. A third figure stood with them, a young woman he had never seen before. "Who is this?" John asked, his voice cautious but curious. His daughters looked at him with excitement and a hint of nervousness. "Father, this is Nayeli," Emma said. "We met her in town. She needed a place to stay for a while. We thought she could come here." Nayeli was striking. She had long, dark hair that fell in waves across her shoulders, and her skin was a rich, warm brown that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Her eyes were deep and calm, observing everything around her with quiet intelligence. She looked nervous but graceful, standing a little apart from the girls. John noticed the way she carried herself, how she seemed to understand the land and the animals just by glancing at them. I just needed somewhere safe," Nayeli said softly. Her voice was steady but gentle, and John felt an unexpected sense of calm. He paused, unsure what to say. The ranch had been lonely for so long, and he had rarely encountered anyone outside of town, especially someone like Nayeli. Still, he knew he could not turn her away, especially not after seeing the trust in his daughter's eyes. "Well, all right," he said finally. "You can stay here for now, but we have rules and you'll need to help with the work." Naomi nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Of course," she said, "I can help however I'm needed." Over the next few days, Naomi began settling into the ranch. She was quick to learn the chores, whether it was feeding the chickens, tending to the garden, or helping mend the fences. Her movements were careful and precise, as though she had a natural understanding of the land. Emma and Leela were thrilled to have her around, showing her how to ride the horses and teaching her their own little tricks with the cattle. The girls' laughter filled the house for the first time in years, and John felt a warmth he had not experienced since Margaret had passed. Evenings became different, too. Instead of sitting alone on the porch, John found himself talking to Naomi. She spoke about her life in the nearby lands, her family, and the traditions she had grown up with. She listened attentively to John's stories about the ranch, about Margaret, and about the adventures of Emma and Leela. Slowly, a connection formed, built on respect and shared work. John found himself smiling more, laughing quietly at Naomi's observations, and feeling less weighed down by loneliness. The ranch itself seemed to come alive. The animals responded to Naomi's care. The house echoed with laughter and conversation, and the once empty kitchen was filled with the aroma of new recipes Naomi experimented with. Even the dusty paths looked brighter, as if the presence of someone new had breathed life into the land. For the first time in years, John felt that maybe, just maybe, his small family could find a new kind of happiness. Yet, even as life began to change, John remained cautious. He knew the world beyond the ranch could be harsh, and he worried about how the neighbors might react to Naomi's presence. There was also a part of him that was uncertain about opening his heart again after so many years of grief. Still, watching Naomi interact with his daughters, seeing her care for the land and animals, and feeling her quiet strength, he realized that sometimes change could be the very thing a person needed to find joy again. That first week with Naomi passed in a blend of work, conversation, and tentative friendship. John noticed small things: how Naomi could calm a frightened horse with just a gentle touch, how she smiled when Leela told a funny story, and how she listened to Emma's questions with patience and care. He began to see her not just as a guest, but as someone who could become part of their lives in ways he hadn't dared imagine. By the time the sun set on the seventh day, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, John stood on the porch once again, looking out over the land. The ranch was still large, still quiet in the distance, but the house behind him no longer felt empty. The sound of laughter from inside, the movement of cattle in the fields, and the presence of Naomi beside his daughters made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. John realized that life on the ranch was beginning to change, and he was ready, perhaps for the first time in years, to embrace it. The lonely days of just him and his daughters were slowly giving way to something new, something bright, something alive. And it all began with the arrival of a young woman who had walked into their lives, quietly, and began to make the ranch feel like a true home again. The days on the McAllister ranch began to feel different after Naomi arrived. The sun rose over the desert, warming the golden fields and casting a soft glow on the wooden fences, and John noticed a new energy in the air. The once quiet ranch now buzzed with activity. Naomi's presence seemed to ripple through the house and fields. The daughters were happier, the animals more content, and even John felt a renewed sense of purpose that surprised him. From the very first morning, Naomi proved herself capable and calm. She knew how to handle the horses, moving with a natural grace that reminded John of his late wife's gentleness. She could guide the animals without force, understanding their moods and needs almost instinctively. The first time she led a young, stubborn colt through a training exercise, Emma and Leela watched in awe. "Wow, she really knows what she's doing," Leela whispered, her eyes wide. "Yeah," Emma agreed, smiling. It's like the horse trusts her already. John watched silently from a distance, feeling a mix of pride and relief. For weeks, he had been worried about managing the ranch, especially since the girls were still learning. Now, Naeli's skills not only helped with the work, but also seemed to teach the girls in ways he couldn't. Naeli also had a quiet intelligence that impressed John. She observed everything carefully before acting, whether it was checking the fences, mending the water troughs, or arranging the feed. She asked thoughtful questions and often suggested small improvements. One morning when the water pump had started leaking, Naeli inspected it carefully. "It's not broken completely," she told John. "If we tighten this valve and adjust the pressure, it should work for a while longer." John nodded slowly, impressed. He had been trying to fix the pump all morning without success. "You really know your way around these things," he admitted. Naeli smiled. "I learned from my family. We always found ways to make do with what we had." Her words struck John. There was something steady and wise about her, something that gave him hope he hadn't felt in years. He realized that Naeli was more than just a helper. She was someone who could guide them through challenges and teach the girls skills they might need in the future. The days passed in a rhythm that was both new and familiar. Mornings were spent with chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and tending to the small garden behind the house. Naeli and the girls would often ride out to check the distant cattle, while John repaired tools or mended fences. Afternoons were warmer and slower, sometimes spent sitting in the shade with a cup of coffee or tending to small projects around the ranch. Evenings brought stories, laughter, and sometimes music as the family gathered together after the day's work. One afternoon, John noticed the way Naeli and his daughters worked together. Leela was showing her how to herd the cattle into the pen, demonstrating tricks she had learned from John. Naeli watched carefully, then corrected Leela gently when she made a mistake, her voice soft but firm. Emma, meanwhile, had taken Naeli aside to teach her how to milk the cows properly. Watching them, John felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that for the first time in many years, the ranch was not just a place of work. It had become a place of learning, laughter, and care. The house that had once felt silent and lonely was now alive with energy and voices. Naeli's presence had begun to reshape their daily lives in subtle but meaningful ways. Despite the growing comfort, John still felt a need to be cautious. He worried about the neighbors and the town. The area was not always welcoming to outsiders, especially someone from a different culture. He knew that gossip could travel fast, and that prejudice could affect not only Naeli but also his daughters. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of red and orange, John walked out to the edge of the fields. Naeli had joined him, carrying a small bucket she had used to fetch water. The air was still and warm, and the distant sound of cattle created a gentle rhythm. "You're worried about the town, aren't you?" Naeli asked quietly. John hesitated, then nodded. "I don't want anyone to say anything or treat you badly. You don't deserve that." Naeli shook her head slightly, her dark eyes calm. "I know, but I am grateful for your trust, John. That is more important than anything anyone else might think." Her words settled over him, and for the first time, he felt that maybe he didn't need to worry so much. Naeli had an inner strength, a quiet confidence that reassured him. He began to realize that their bond, though still new, was built on respect and understanding. As the days turned into weeks, Naeli continued to impress John. She was resourceful in ways he hadn't expected. One morning, after a particularly dry week, she led him to a small patch of desert where water had collected in a natural depression. The discovery was small but crucial, allowing the ranch to water the cattle without exhausting the main well. John was amazed. "How did you know about this?" he asked. "I grew up learning the land," Naeli replied simply. "The earth tells you where to look if you listen carefully." John smiled, a mix of admiration and relief. It was a lesson he would not forget. Nayeli's skills, her knowledge of the land, and her calm confidence were proving to be invaluable to the ranch. The girls thrived as well. Emma began to ask more questions, curious about Nayeli's experiences and traditions. Leela, full of energy and excitement, followed her everywhere, learning tricks of the trade and even some survival skills she never would have imagined. They spent hours talking, laughing, and exploring together. John watched them, grateful that his daughters had someone like Nayeli to learn from, someone who could guide them gently and patiently. Nayeli's presence also affected John in unexpected ways. He found himself thinking about her when he wasn't working, wondering what she might be doing, or remembering a quiet smile she had given. He realized that her influence was no longer limited to work or the ranch. It was touching his heart, his mind, and the way he saw his world. Evenings became a special time. After the day's work was done, the family would gather in the main room of the house. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over the wooden walls. Nayeli sometimes shared stories of her childhood, tales of the desert, and the people who lived there. The girls listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that led to laughter or thoughtful discussion. John joined in, telling his own stories of ranch life, of Margaret, and of the challenges they had faced. Through these shared moments, the house felt like a home again. The emptiness that had once weighed so heavily on John's shoulders was slowly lifting. Laughter echoed through the rooms, and even the quiet moments were filled with a sense of peace and belonging. For the first time in years, John felt a sense of hope for the future. One afternoon, a small incident reminded John just how much Nayeli had become part of their lives. A young calf had wandered off, and despite Leela's best efforts, it had gotten stuck in a narrow ravine. John and Nayeli rushed to help. Nayeli's calm instructions and quick thinking guided John and Leela as they carefully lifted the calf to safety. When the calf was finally back with the herd, Emma hugged Nayeli tightly, and John felt a deep gratitude welling in his heart. Nayeli had not just helped save the calf. She had become a part of their family, someone they could rely on in ways John had never imagined. As the weeks passed, the bond between Nayeli and the family grew stronger. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of learning, laughter, and trust. The once lonely house echoed with voices and footsteps. The fields, fences, and animals thrived under the combined care of John, his daughters, and Nayeli. John knew that life was changing. The quiet, lonely days were giving way to something brighter, more alive, and more meaningful. Nayeli's presence had transformed their world slowly and gently but undeniably, and John could no longer imagine life on the ranch without her. The first part of the change had been small, almost imperceptible: a smile, a helpful hand, a quiet story by the fire. But now, as the sun set on another day, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, John understood that the arrival of this young woman had shifted their lives forever. The ranch, once silent and lonely, was alive with warmth, energy, and the promise of a new beginning. Life on the McAllister Ranch continued to change in small, meaningful ways as Nayeli became more comfortable with her new surroundings. Each day, she and the girls discovered something new about the land, the animals, and each other. John noticed that the ranch, once quiet and predictable, now hummed with energy and curiosity. Even the wind seemed to carry a liveliness that had been absent before. Nayeli was not only skilled with the ranch work, but also had a deep understanding of nature. She could read the signs of the land, the patterns of the wind, the behavior of the animals, and even the faint changes in the soil that indicated where water might be found. One morning, as they walked along the edge of the pasture, Nayeli paused to examine a patch of wild grass. "This ground is good for grazing," she explained to John. "The grass here will stay green longer even if the sun is hot." John was impressed. He had been ranching for decades, yet Nayeli's observations revealed things he had overlooked. "You have a good eye," he said quietly. "I've never thought about it this way." She smiled a little shyly. "I grew up learning to notice these things. The land speaks if you listen carefully." The girls watched the exchange, clearly fascinated. Emma asked questions about how to tell the difference between grasses, while Leela eagerly ran ahead, pointing out different plants and insects. Nayeli patiently explained each one, teaching them how to observe the land, not just walk through it. Over time, John realized that Nayeli was doing more than just helping with chores. She was teaching the girls life skills he could not provide alone. Her lessons went beyond riding horses or tending cattle. They were lessons about respect, patience, and understanding the world around them. Nayeli often told stories of her childhood, of her family and her people, the Apache, and how they lived in harmony with the land. These stories were different from anything the girls had heard before, and they listened intently, learning not just about the land but also about culture, history, and resilience. One afternoon, while repairing a fence, John overheard the girls asking Nayeli about some of the customs and traditions of her people. Nayeli spoke carefully, explaining how her family valued cooperation, storytelling, and respect for the natural world. She described ceremonies, dances, and songs, carefully avoiding anything sacred or private. The girls were enchanted, their eyes wide with wonder. "Do you think we could learn some of your songs?" Leela asked eagerly. Nayeli laughed softly. "Some of them, yes. But the most important part is understanding why we sing, not just the words." John smiled quietly from his spot on the fence post. He could see the girls were not only learning new skills, but also developing empathy and understanding for someone different from themselves. He realized that Nayeli was helping them grow in ways he had hoped for but never expected to find. Yet life on the ranch was not without challenges. The local townspeople were cautious, even suspicious, of Nayeli. Some avoided her, while others whispered when they thought no one was listening. John was aware of the prejudice, and it weighed heavily on him. He wanted to protect Nayeli and his daughters, but he also wanted them to learn how to handle the world beyond the ranch. One day, while Emma and Leela were in town to fetch supplies, John followed behind at a distance, keeping an eye on them. He saw a group of men glance at Nayeli and mutter under their breath. John's stomach tightened. He wanted to confront them, but Nayeli noticed nothing, moving calmly and confidently as she helped carry baskets of food. John realized that her composure and strength were just as important as her skills with the land. Back at the ranch, John sat on the porch, thinking about how much Nayeli had changed their lives. She had arrived quietly, without demand or expectation, yet she had begun to transform the household in ways he could hardly put into words. The daughters were happier, more confident, and more curious about the world. The ranch ran more smoothly, and even John felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Nayeli led the girls to a nearby hill to watch the sunset. She pointed out landmarks, telling them the names her family used for them, and explaining how each one had a story or significance. The girls listened intently, absorbing every detail. John joined them, standing a few steps behind, and felt a deep sense of peace. The family was no longer just surviving. They were learning, growing, and connecting in ways that made life richer and more meaningful. But the desert was unpredictable. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and John felt a twinge of worry. He knew that sudden storms could be dangerous, especially for the cattle grazing in open fields. Nayeli noticed his concern and suggested they move the animals to a more sheltered area. Together, they worked quickly, guiding the cattle toward a small valley where the hills provided protection. The girls followed closely, helping as best they could. By the time the storm hit, the animals were safe, and the family watched from a distance as rain poured over the desert. John was grateful for Nayeli's quick thinking and knowledge of the land. Without her, he knew the cattle could have been scattered or worse. Her presence was no longer a simple help. She was essential to the ranch's survival. In the evenings after the storm, as the earth smelled fresh and the air cooled, Nayeli would gather the girls around the fire and tell stories of survival and courage. She spoke of her ancestors, of journeys through deserts, and of facing challenges with patience and skill. The girls listened with rapt attention, inspired by her courage and calm demeanor. John would often sit quietly, listening too, learning from her wisdom even as he provided guidance of his own. Over time, John began to notice small changes in himself. He felt more patient, more thoughtful, and more willing to listen. Nayeli had a way of encouraging people to see the world differently, not through force or criticism, but through quiet observation and careful guidance. He admired her strength and resilience, and he found himself trusting her judgment more with each passing day. The daughters flourished under Nayeli's guidance as well. Emma began taking more initiative on the ranch, handling tasks that had once been difficult for her. Leela's energy and curiosity found direction, and she learned patience alongside confidence. Nayeli's presence allowed the girls to grow in ways that John had hoped for but never fully realized. They were learning practical skills, cultural awareness, and emotional resilience, all while enjoying their days and feeling secure in their home. One afternoon, John observed a tender moment between Nayeli and the girls. Leela had accidentally tangled her hair in the reins while learning to ride, and Nayeli knelt down to gently untangle it, speaking softly to calm the girl. Emma watched, a small smile on her face, and John felt a warmth in his heart. These quiet, everyday moments were powerful. They showed him how Nayeli was shaping not only the ranch but the family itself. Despite these joys, John knew that challenges would continue to arise. The world outside the ranch could be unforgiving, and prejudice and misunderstandings could threaten the fragile harmony they had built. Yet he also realized that Nayeli's presence had prepared them to face those challenges together. Her knowledge, wisdom, and calm strength were not just useful, they were transformative. As the days grew longer and the sun rose higher over the desert, John understood that Nayeli's arrival had changed their lives in ways he could never have imagined. She had arrived quietly without expectation, but she had become a teacher, a guide, and a bridge between the past and the present. Through her, the family had learned to see the land, the animals, and each other in new ways. By the end of the third month, life on the ranch had found a new rhythm. Nayeli had become a permanent part of the household. The daughters laughed more freely, the animals were healthier, and John felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. The house, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with voices, movement, and warmth. The ranch itself seemed to thrive, reflecting the care, knowledge, and heart that Nayeli had brought to it. John often reflected on the transformation. The quiet life he had once known was gone, replaced by a rich, complex, and meaningful existence. Nayeli had brought more than help. She had brought understanding, resilience, and hope. The family was learning not just to survive, but to thrive, and John felt a deep sense of joy in that knowledge. As the sun set on another day, painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of red and orange, John stood on the porch, watching Nayeli and the girls in the fields. He realized that life on the ranch would never be the same again. And for the first time in many years, he felt that change could be a good thing, necessary, even, and that the future, once uncertain and lonely, now held promise, warmth, and connection. The summer that followed Nayeli's arrival brought both heat and challenges to the McAllister ranch. The days were long, the sun burned brighter, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly. For weeks, the skies remained cloudless, and the ground grew harder and drier. The ranch, which had thrived under John's careful attention, now faced a new threat, a severe drought. The grass in the pastures began to wither, leaving only dry, brittle stalks. The cattle, once content and grazing freely, wandered restlessly, searching for patches of green. Even the smaller animals, like chickens and goats, seemed restless. John noticed the strain in their movements and the faint anxiety in their eyes. He walked the fields each morning and evening, assessing the situation, but the dry earth made him uneasy. He knew that if the drought continued, the ranch could face serious losses. Naeli, observing quietly, suggested a plan that John had not considered. She explained how the land could reveal hidden water sources and how certain desert plants indicated the presence of moisture beneath the soil. John, experienced though he was, had never seen the desert with such insight. He listened carefully, impressed by her knowledge. "Lead the way," he said one morning. "Show me where you think we can find water." Naeli smiled and began guiding John and the daughters toward a narrow ravine hidden behind a line of rocky hills. She moved with confidence, reading the land like an open book. Her eyes scanned the ground, noting subtle signs, the type of rocks, the way the soil looked, the faint smell of dampness. After a short walk, she stopped and knelt beside a patch of cracked earth. "Here," she said softly, "beneath this water collects. If we dig carefully, we can create a small reservoir to water the cattle." John nodded, amazed. He had spent years managing the ranch and knew the land well, yet Naeli's observation had uncovered something he had never noticed. Together they began digging, the girls helping as best they could. Hours passed under the relentless sun, sweat dripping from their brows, but Naeli remained calm and encouraging, showing them how to dig efficiently and safely. By late afternoon, they had unearthed a small pool of water, enough to give the cattle some relief. John looked at Naeli with admiration. "You've saved them," he said quietly. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Naeli simply smiled. "The land helps those who listen," she said. "We just needed to pay attention." The girls were thrilled. Leela splashed water on her hands and laughed, while Emma carefully helped guide the cattle to the new water source. John felt a deep sense of pride, not only in Naeli but also in the daughters, who had learned patience, observation, and problem-solving through her guidance. The drought, however, was far from over. Days passed, and the sun continued to scorch the land. The reservoir they had dug was only a temporary solution. John realized they needed a long-term plan to survive the season. He and Naeli spent hours walking the property, studying the soil, noting where water had once flowed, and marking areas that could be dug or diverted. She suggested ways to conserve the remaining water and how to ration it effectively for the cattle, chickens, and household use. John began to rely on Naeli in ways he had never imagined. Her knowledge, calm demeanor, and problem-solving skills complemented his experience perfectly. He trusted her judgment completely, and he noticed that his own stress and worry had lessened. The ranch, though still struggling under the harsh sun, felt more manageable because of her. The daughters, too, played an essential role. Emma took responsibility for keeping the smaller animals hydrated and fed, learning from Naeli how to prioritize and plan carefully. Leela helped with the cattle, guiding them gently to the new water source and making sure no one strayed. John watched them, amazed at how the three of them, his daughters and Naeli, worked together like a well-oiled team. One afternoon, as the family worked together to move a stubborn cow to the reservoir, a sudden windstorm kicked up. Dust and debris swirled through the fields, and the cattle panicked. John barked instructions, trying to keep control, but Naeli remained calm. She moved among the animals with quiet authority, guiding them with gentle words and steady hands. Emma and Leela followed her lead, helping to calm the herd. Within minutes, the chaos subsided and the animals settled by the water. John stood back, breathing heavily but filled with gratitude. "You saved them," he said to Naeli. "I don't know how we would have managed without you." She shook her head. "We saved them together," she replied softly. That evening, after the storm had passed and the sun dipped behind the hills, the family gathered on the porch. The air was cool and fresh, and the sky was painted in soft purples and oranges. The girls chattered about the day's events, laughing and sharing observations, while John sat quietly, watching Nayeli. He realized something profound. Her presence had changed more than the ranch's survival. Nayeli had taught them how to work together, to observe carefully, and to face challenges without fear. She had shown them that problems could be solved with patience, wisdom, and teamwork. For John, this was more valuable than anything else. The drought continued for weeks, and the family faced countless small crises. Water ran low, the pastures dried further, and the cattle grew restless. Each day, Nayeli guided them with quiet authority, showing John and the girls how to make the most of what they had. She taught them how to collect morning dew, how to store water safely, and even how to spot edible plants for emergencies. John noticed that his admiration for Nayeli had grown beyond respect. He found himself thinking about her when she was not around, noticing her quiet laughter, her careful attention to the animals, and her unwavering calm during crises. He realized that he trusted her completely, not just with the ranch, but with his family and the daughter's safety. Her presence had become central to their lives in ways he hadn't anticipated. The daughters, too, grew closer to Nayeli. They relied on her for guidance, support, and encouragement. Emma began to take on leadership roles, organizing tasks and helping Leela learn patience and care. Leela, in turn, found a friend and mentor in Nayeli, someone who shared her energy but helped focus it productively. Together, the three of them created a rhythm on the ranch that balanced work, learning, and joy, even under the harsh conditions of the drought. One afternoon, John was working in the barn when Nayeli approached him with a thoughtful look. "There is a small canyon not far from here," she said. "I believe we could build a larger reservoir there. It would take time, but it could sustain the ranch through the rest of the season." John nodded, impressed by her foresight. "We'll do it," he said. "If anyone can make it happen, it's you." Over the next few days, the family worked tirelessly. They dug, carried water, and reinforced the canyon with stones and wooden supports. Nayeli guided them every step of the way, offering advice, encouragement, and practical solutions. The girls learned resilience, teamwork, and the satisfaction of seeing hard work pay off. John felt a deep sense of pride in their accomplishments and a growing admiration for Nayeli's wisdom and determination. When the reservoir was finally finished, it was more than a source of water. It was a symbol of the family's strength, unity, and perseverance. The cattle drank freely, the chickens and goats were refreshed, and the house felt alive with energy and relief. John realized that Nayeli had done more than help them survive the drought. She had taught them how to thrive in the face of adversity. That night, as the family gathered around the fire, the air cool and calm, John reflected on how much had changed in a few short months. Nayeli had come into their lives quietly, offering her help and her wisdom, and had transformed the ranch, the daughters, and even John himself. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, and he knew that their bond had grown stronger than he had ever imagined possible. For the first time in many years, John allowed himself to feel hope, not just for the ranch, but for the family as a whole. Nayeli had shown him that even in difficult times, resilience, patience, and cooperation could create something beautiful. The drought, which had seemed like a threat, had instead become a lesson in strength, trust, and unity. As the fire crackled and the night settled over the desert, John watched Nayeli and the daughters quietly. Their laughter and conversation filled the air, blending with the soft sounds of the night, the rustle of the wind through the dry grass, the distant calls of coyotes, and the gentle murmurs of the cattle resting in the fields. In that moment, he realized that life on the ranch, once quiet and lonely, was now vibrant, strong, and full of promise. Nayeli had not only helped them survive the drought, she had changed the family forever. After the drought had passed and the reservoir in the canyon had been completed, life on the McAllister Ranch entered a new rhythm. The cattle grazed peacefully, the smaller animals thrived, and the garden behind the house flourished once more. The family had worked tirelessly to survive the harsh summer, but their efforts had paid off. The ranch was stronger than ever, not just in its resources, but in the bonds that held the family together. John McAllister felt a deep sense of relief and pride. He watched his daughters, Emma and Leela, as they tended the animals and worked in the fields with energy and care. Their confidence had grown remarkably over the months, guided by Nayeli's gentle but firm instruction. The girls had learned more than just practical skills. They had learned patience, observation, and the value of cooperation. Nayeli's teachings had left an imprint on their hearts, shaping them into young women ready to face the world. Nayeli herself had become an inseparable part of the ranch. She moved with quiet authority, managing the chores, teaching the girls and assisting John in ways that went far beyond simple labor. But her presence also brought warmth, laughter, and companionship. John found himself thinking about her often, noticing her calm strength, her attentive nature, and the kindness she showed not just to the family, but to the animals and the land itself. One morning, John rose early to check the fields. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the desert in shades of soft gold and pink. He mounted his horse and rode toward the pasture, noticing Nayeli already at work with the girls. She was showing them how to guide the cattle gently, her voice calm and steady. Emma followed her instructions carefully, while Leela laughed as she tried to keep up. John smiled quietly. It was a scene of harmony and life, one he had not imagined for the ranch just a few months ago. As the weeks passed, the family continued to thrive. The drought had left them stronger and more connected, and John realized how much Nayeli had transformed their lives. One afternoon, after the chores were finished, Nayeli suggested they all walk to a nearby hill to watch the sunset together. It had become a small tradition, a way to appreciate the land and the peace that had returned to the ranch. They climbed the hill slowly, Nayeli supporting Leela when her foot slipped on the rocky path, and Emma carrying a small basket of water and supplies. When they reached the top, the view stretched endlessly before them. The fields, the pastures, the distant mountains, all bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The air was filled with the scent of dry grass and the cool touch of evening wind. John stood quietly, looking at Nayeli and the girls. The sight filled him with gratitude. This young woman who had arrived in their lives quietly and without expectation had changed everything. She had brought knowledge, patience, and skill, but also something deeper: trust, respect, and hope. The ranch was thriving, yes, but the family itself had flourished in ways John had never anticipated. "Father," Emma said softly, breaking the quiet, "we couldn't have done it without Nayeli." Leela nodded vigorously. "She taught us so much. I can't imagine the ranch without her." John smiled and turned to Nayeli. "You've done more than help us survive the drought," he said. "You've made this place a home again. I can't thank you enough." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes calm and steady. "I am grateful to be here," she replied. "You welcomed me into your family. That is more than I could ask for." In the days that followed, John began to see how the community around them was slowly adjusting to Nayeli's presence. Some neighbors who had been cautious or suspicious began to notice the improvements on the ranch and the harmony within the household. They saw the daughter's confidence, the care with which the cattle were managed, and the overall success of the ranch despite the drought. Gradually, respect replaced suspicion, and Nayeli was recognized not just as a helper, but as a valued part of the family and the community. John also noticed subtle changes in himself. His admiration for Nayeli had grown into something deeper. He respected her wisdom, appreciated her patience, and admired her quiet strength. He realized that he trusted her not just with the ranch, but with his heart, his daughters, and the life he had built. Naomi's presence had awakened emotions in him that he had long thought dormant, feelings he could no longer ignore. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, John found himself alone with Naomi for a moment on the porch. The sky was deepening into twilight, the first stars appearing above the desert horizon. He looked at her, noticing the gentle curve of her smile and the calm light in her eyes. "Naomi," he began, his voice quiet, I don't know how to say this. You've changed our lives in so many ways. I hope you know how much you mean to us." Naomi met his gaze steadily. "I feel the same, John," she said softly. "This family, it has become my home, and you have shown me trust, kindness, and respect." The moment was quiet but filled with understanding. John realized that Naomi's place in their lives was no longer temporary. She was family in every sense of the word. The girls had already accepted her completely, and now John's heart followed suit. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of joy and stability. The ranch thrived, the daughters flourished under Naomi's guidance, and John found a balance of work, care, and companionship that he had not felt in years. Life was no longer just about survival. It was about connection, growth, and shared purpose. Naomi continued to teach the girls, not just practical skills but also lessons about respect, empathy, and the value of working together. Emma took more responsibility for the ranch, confident in her abilities, while Leela learned patience and careful observation. John observed their progress with pride, grateful for the quiet guidance Naomi provided. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher stopped by, curious about the improvements and the family's resilience during the drought. He greeted Naomi cautiously, unsure how to approach her. But John spoke warmly, introducing her as an integral part of their family. Naomi responded with grace and humility, answering questions about the land and the cattle with calm confidence. By the end of the visit, the neighbor left impressed, and John felt a quiet satisfaction. Naomi's presence had not only strengthened their family, but had also changed how others viewed them. As the seasons shifted, the McAllister Ranch became a place of harmony and growth. The animals were healthy, the pastures lush, and the home filled with laughter, learning, and warmth. The family had weathered challenges together and emerged stronger, united by trust, respect, and care. Naomi's arrival, which had once seemed unexpected and uncertain, had become the catalyst for a new beginning. John often reflected on the changes in their lives. He thought about the loneliness he had felt before Naomi came, the quiet afternoons that seemed endless and empty. Now the house was full of life and energy, the ranch thriving under careful guidance, and the daughters confident and capable. Naomi's presence had transformed everything, and John realized that life's unexpected arrivals could sometimes bring the greatest blessings. One late evening, after a long day tending the animals, John and Naomi stood on the porch together, watching the stars appear above the desert. The air was cool and still, the sounds of the ranch quieting for the night. John felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Naomi stood beside him, calm and steady, a gentle smile on her lips. "Thank you, Naomi," he said quietly, "for everything, for the ranch, for the girls, for me." Naomi looked up at the stars, then back at him. "We have all helped each other," she replied. "This family, it is strong because we are together." John nodded, understanding the truth of her words. Life on the ranch had changed, not because of wealth or luck, but because of trust, hard work, and the bonds they had built together. Naomi's presence had brought them together in ways he had never imagined, and he knew that the family would continue to thrive, whatever challenges lay ahead. The following weeks were filled with the simple joys of ranch life. Riding through the pastures with the daughters, working side by side with Naomi, sharing meals around the kitchen table, and enjoying quiet evenings under the stars. John noticed that his heart was lighter, his mind calmer, and his spirit more hopeful. The loneliness he had once known had disappeared, replaced by connection, care, and love. One afternoon, as the sun rose over the desert and the cattle grazed peacefully, John realized that the ranch had become more than just a home. It was a place of learning, growth, and harmony, a true family home. Nayeli's arrival had transformed their lives, and the bonds they had built were unbreakable. The daughters were thriving, the ranch was strong, and John felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. As the day ended, the family gathered on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Leela laughed at something Nayeli had said, Emma smiled as she adjusted the water buckets, and John felt a deep warmth in his chest. Nayeli stood with them, part of the family in every way. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, now flourished with life, laughter, and hope. John knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Nayeli's arrival had brought them strength, knowledge, and love. The McAllister Ranch had become more than a home. It had become a family, united by trust, respect, and shared experiences. And in that unity, John found the greatest happiness he had ever known. Life had changed for the better, and it would never be the same again.